everyone, and welcome to our panel. Before we start, I'll just have to mention that we have Mr. Michael Donaldson, who will not be here, and I will invite our panelists to introduce themselves.
Hello, my name is Jordi Piscali. I'm the director of the Research and Security Department of CITEL. And CITEL, we are working specifically talking about this panel on electronic voting, and this is one of the use cases where the conflicts between privacy and auditability are pretty strong. So I think that I can provide experience on my side on this matter.
My name is Claudio Chifa. I come from DLT Code, a private company specialized in security audit and very similar development, but internal for training and blockchain related projects. As you saw in the panel before, we work a lot with security and trying to understand the context of the world around us in order to provide better services to our customers and our customers to be more reliable.
My name is Sven Erfurt. I have a background in law and computer science. I'm advising on GDPR and Schengen. No? It's better now?
Can we have some help with the microphone?
Yeah. Is this better? Okay. Sorry for that. So I'm advising on blockchain and GDPR, okay.
Yeah, it's okay. It's okay.
Okay, perfect. I'm head of technology inside at Geneva Macro Labs. We are promoting sustainable innovation. It's an association in Geneva, and I'm also teaching at different universities. And as was the tensions between privacy on the one side and transparency is something which is really striking my mind.
Thank you. And I'm Mark Anakin, and I'm the managing director of RB3.ch. And I'm also from Geneva, like Jorn. We are a crypto and blockchain one-stop shop based in Geneva, Switzerland. So before we start, I'd like to ask Jorn to repeat this example he gave about COVID vaccination process in Germany, as I think it's a very good concrete example to highlight some of the issues on this topic of the tension between privacy and transparency.
Well, we discussed this, how vaccination is treated in different countries, and in Germany there is no central register for COVID vaccinations. So it's done by doctors, it's done by vaccination centers, and you get a card where the vaccination is stamped, and then you can go to a pharmacy where you can go get your digital certificate. And of course, this is not very secure, and it means that the German government doesn't even have exact numbers how many people are vaccinated. And other countries have different rules. They all apply GDPR. In Denmark, there's a central vaccination database since 2015, if I'm correct. And in Spain, as I have learned, you also have a central database, which is of course not as privacy friendly, but maybe it serves its purpose.
Yes. So maybe we can start off with the question, what is personal data and what is transparency? Maybe Claudio or
Well, personal data is something that actually identifies someone. It can come in many ways. It can come as a picture, as a specific piece of information, and it becomes data with its context or with the use you give it. This comes in a beginning defined by different type of legislations that says which is personal, which is not personal, but it's not always clear. Sometimes you need to go to the ethical standpoint of view, and sometimes on the researcher point of view to actually determine if it's personal data or not. For example, so we were discussing before having a drink that many countries and GDPR does not certain data by itself are not considered as personal data. But we know from a point of view of researchers that it's very easily to gather information from that and actually turn it into personal data. So it's very complicated to find actually the balance, and we always have to look first at the law and after a little bit at our own ethics.
Jordi?
Yeah, well, from our point of view, there are different types of personal data. For instance, there is personal data that is uniquely identifying the people, in our case, the voters or citizens. But we need also to consider that there are personal data that, from the point of view of GDPR, is considered also a special case of personal data. For instance, a political decision that could be a vote. And from our point of view, this is a problem when you need to think about transparency, how you are managing a transparent process, and at the same time you need to protect the personal data. And if you think about the voting process per se, you need at the same time to protect privacy of voters, and in this case, the opinion of the voters, that is special personal data. But at the same time, you need to allow people to check that the results of the elections are really representing the decision of the different voters. So from our point of view, personal data is important. It's something that needs to be preserved in a private way, but at the same time, from the point of view of transparency, you need also to provide means to check that this personal data that is protected really represents the decision of the voters.
So now you're bringing us to an interesting point. I mean, since this conference is about blockchain and democracy, let's go straight there. And let me ask you this question. Does data remain personal if it's put on the blockchain?
Yeah.
Anybody can?
So, the acoustic question, you said, why is personal data on a blockchain personal? Or
Does the data remain personal if it's put on a blockchain?
of course, it doesn't change its nature. And of course, you have an issue that you cannot delete data on a blockchain, which is addresses the right to be forgotten. And how can you delete data that you cannot forget? How can you forget data that you cannot delete? So, of course, this is an issue. And that's the reason you should not put directly personal data on the blockchain. But what about data that is encrypted? What about data that belongs to zero knowledge proof? What about hashes from personal data? And these are all types of data that can, under certain circumstances, transform into personal data. And you really have to look at the concrete example, if this transformation is possible or not. And if you can, it's personal data. Still, personal data under certain circumstances, it can be put on a blockchain. For example, if you want to put the election result on a blockchain, it's possible because you have the obligation to publish it. So it is possible to publish and put personal data on a blockchain. It's not completely forbidden. But for most use cases, you shouldn't do that. And you should try to put only the proof of the data on the blockchain. And even then, you have to be very careful that this proof is not personal data itself.
Yes, but there's another point, and when we're talking about voting and voting remotely and blockchain, not only the data that you put there has to be very well thought of, because it's not the same to put the ID number with a hash converted directly on blockchain, which in the future, that by brute force whatsoever, you can actually convert it again to the document number or the name whatsoever, to do it from the exact image of what the passport is or the national document. And that's an issue that it requires for you to study what you're going to do and do some wise choices and to do an actual risk analysis. The technology is able to do many wonderful things. The issue is how we use it, but also how we interact with it. Because when we're talking about online voting and register this type of data on blockchain and doing massive interactions with blockchains, in terms of democracy is not just the blockchain itself and the information you put there. It's how you move the information there. So for example, if you have a city that has the same internet provider and votes in the same place, because you voted and you put in a specific moment of time and a specific vote, you could actually measure from which home that vote came. And that's still personal data and it's still a personal interaction. So it's not just the technology, it's how we use it, how we interact with it, because there are many ways to spin it around. And our information for more that we actually put a certificate on top of it, most of the times we forget some other basic things, and it's not completely anonymized. Even if you put whatever anonymization you want, if you can still know that there's a picture transmitted over that connection, even though if you cannot see the picture. And there are techniques to protect against that and so on, but it still comes to a risk analysis and to have a very good understanding of what you're actually doing, more than the technology itself.
Well, from the point of view of blockchain, this large debate about if it's interesting to store or how the data that you are protecting in a blockchain, especially if it is personal data, is, for instance, comply with some regulations like the GDPR. Recently, I think 2019, there is a report that is talking about the conflicts that is generating the use of blockchain and personal data, and is considering which measures maybe you can implement to protect this data. But at the end, there are things, approaches. If you put personal data without protection on a blockchain, one of the problems that you usually have from the point of view of GDPR is that anything that you are putting in a blockchain, especially if we are talking about public blockchain, remains there. So that means that there are rights that, like that you want to delete your personal records from any place. In theory, this cannot happen in a blockchain. I think that 2 presentations before, I have listened that there were storing only hashes of information to avoid this, and only the personal data is stored in a private database. And there are approaches that are that follow it in this case. It also says that, for instance, encryption is not enough for saying that a personal data that it is encrypted then is not longer personal data, it's still personal data. So even if you are encrypting information and storing this information in a blockchain, you should manage this information as personal data, because at the end, someone has the ability to decrypt this information. Also, you have other conflicts, for instance, long-term privacy. What will happen with this personal data, even if it's encrypted and stored in a blockchain? What will happen with this information if maybe in the future we have quantum computers that were able to decrypt this information because they will break the current cryptographic algorithms? How this information will be preserved long-term, at least the privacy of this information. So these are challenges that should be considered when someone is storing information in a blockchain. So this does not mean that you cannot use blockchain, only that when you are designing a solution that you are managing personal data and you're managing blockchain, that you need to consider, that you need to design your solution thinking about these challenges that you will have, not only now, but on the future, and also the regulations like GDPR that are now in force, and that in case that you are making any mistake, you can be fined. So it's a problem that you need to consider. It's not blocking the use of blockchain, but when you're designing something, personal data and blockchain has some challenges to solve.
You brought us this way to our next topic, which is, you halfway answered that, but maybe others have their say. What are the future implications of, let's say, putting personal data on the blockchain? Maybe Claudio or Jorn, you have something to say about that. What are the future implications of having personal data that is somehow encrypted on a blockchain?
As you said, of course, cryptography might become insecure, at least the cryptography that we use right now with quantum computers. It is a waste of space. Usually storing information on a blockchain is very expensive. So you should not store real information on the blockchain, rather some proofs of it. But generally speaking, privacy is a basic human right. Transparency is one as well. And we have to balance them. And if you look, for example, to Denmark, you can find the land registry in the internet. And it's open, it's free, and you can look up who owns what, and even what kind of mortgage is registered on what property. And this is completely legal, even though GDPR is applicable in Denmark as well. And this means we have to balance them, and we might have different cultures, we might have different decisions, what right is more important, if privacy is more important or transparency is more important. And then there's a question, who is going to decide and how is it going to evolve? So should we put something into technology so the decision about the balance between transparency and privacy is fixed and cannot be changed? Or should we trust it to a future government that will change it, that will say, well, this information should now become private, or this should be accessible, and we just put it into some zero knowledge proofs and cannot be extracted anymore because we decided this information should stay private. So it's a decision between, should we rely on technology to implement what we decided today is right, or should we rely on future governments that they can decide whatever they want and do whatever they want with the data?
Yeah. And you have the integration of three main areas here already, where you have technology, politics, and temporal considerations.
And the last
And temporal time, consideration of time, because we're taking decisions now, and we have to consider the use of, or the, let's say, the impact of the decisions in the future.
Yes.
Claudio, you wanted to react there?
Well, there's a little bit with doing a follow back about the previous question. We always talk about privacy, but privacy and intimacy is not the same thing. So we must not confuse when we talk about privacy, the right, and something that's about data, to the right to our intimacy. Sometimes maybe when we talk about voting and who we voted and putting that information on a blockchain, maybe it's not about privacy anymore, and it's more about intimacy, which are different rights guaranteed by different laws, in some places by constitutions, in some places by separate laws, and so on. So it's a very complicated part, and from a legal point of view, the only way to actually do something good about it, it's not into waiting for a new regulation or a new government, but more into do a risk analysis on exactly how it's going to impact the data that you're using, how it's going to impact your business first, be selfish, see how on her user, how it's going to impact them. But, and as well, try to understand your context, where you are. It's not the same laws in Spain as in Denmark. Even if we still have the same GDPR as a basis, something changes. It's not the same constitution all over the world, where in most of the European countries and most of the world, you have a Bill of Rights, which protects intimacy, which is not the same as privacy. They come close, but it's not the same. For example, Australia doesn't have something like that. So in Australia, you can do whatever interception of communication you want because there's no right to intimacy. There are some laws on privacy, but it doesn't go to intimacy, which is different. So on this thing, I think that us, which we develop the technologies and we work closely with them, first we should have more friends lawyers and have more beers with lawyers and actually understand the context of where we are and also the context of where we want to operate.
Well, from the point of view when thinking about long term, thinking about based on blockchain, I think that there are two different aspects here. One, we are talking about transparency, that usually this is linked to the integrity of the information. And I think that here blockchain, well, maybe now it's more based on standard algorithms, but I don't see any risk there because in the future, for instance, there are other types of cryptographic algorithms that are stronger. You can apply them. Integrity, you can renew always integrity. So you have something digitally signed. Maybe in the future, someone says, okay, I know how to block your algorithm, sign it again, and then you renew the integrity and the authenticity of this information. Maybe the concern is about privacy, because once you lose privacy, you cannot renew privacy. You cannot make people to forget that what they learn is not there. So I think that from the point of view of long term, I don't see any problem putting information on our blockchain. In fact, this is giving more also long-term transparency to any process. If someone wants to review again if something was done in a proper way, then you can preserve this. The concern is more about privacy, but in contrast, it's interesting to see that sometimes the transparency has more short-term from the point of view from a legal point of view. For instance, there are laws that says, okay, after 5 years, then if you make something, then you cannot be fined about this, because then there is like an expiration of what you are doing. So sometimes says, okay, technically, from a technical point of view, integrity and transparency can be long-term, no problems. From the legal point of view, then it depends on the law. If you want to extend how many time or how many years you want to preserve any evidence of something.
Now we're moving slowly in the area of regulation, as Claudio mentioned also just a minute ago. Are we moving too fast? Jorn, you beautifully put it when we were talking before. You said technology moves faster than law, but law is much more powerful than technology. And maybe somebody before mentioned that identity was a concept that was about 100 years old. I don't know about that claim, but the idea was that, is it too early to move, identity onto the blockchain or on the internet?
Well, do we want everything transparent? Do we want everything on the blockchain? Do we want everything on the internet? The first question is, okay, I'm in a democracy and I want to see where my money is being spent and I want everything transparent. Okay, but does that mean that it has to go both ways? Since the government is transparent with everything, I have to be transparent with everything as well? But identity, it's been with us for as long as we know, but it's tribe, who's the part of your tribe, either it's on paper or not. So it doesn't, the concept of IDing someone, it's been there forever. So it's, who owns the land and so on. So that's like 100 years old, then it's not very coherent. But we have to act as a democracy. The other good part of blockchain and the other good thing that happened with all this is the DAOs, that everybody votes, that everybody discusses stuff. And why don't we all agree on what we want to put there? So I want things transparent, but I know which things I want transparent. And it doesn't have to be that if I require the government to have certain things transparent, they can put a law so I have to be more transparent with certain things. Well, there are limits. When we're talking about government relation, it's mostly about money. All the rest that I do and how I spend my life is my thing. And I remember on a panel with the Chamber of Commerce of Austria, I think it was, The president of the Chamber of Commerce asked me, would you donate your data to science? So that you have all this huge amount of data that we pile up from everybody's test results from different diseases and so on. And theoretically, we would be able to fix a lot of things in the world and a lot of diseases with all this. And I mean, fairly in my case, I would do it because I know where it will go and the impact it's going to have. But I decided not to give him a yes and challenge him a little bit and ask him, would you donate your body to science? Once you're gone, would you donate your body to science? I mean, the data that you generate now every day impacts you personally a lot more than if donating your body to science for further investigation. So because you're gone. But now all the test results, everything that you share, maybe you discover with all that there's a certain disease and you will get fired based on that. And your health insurance will gonna be more expensive. And the bank will pressure you more for certain things. So how much are we transparent in all this and how we're regulating? It's a huge issue. And we should be able ourselves to vote on those things and be actually more, know where we actually are, what's our context, and why would we actually be transparent or not on something, and drive the law. The law goes at its own pace because it's not a special organism that grows a tree. There are people behind that, and you have to incentivize these people to go there, regulate things, and do it better for everybody. We don't do it. Now the people are starting to do it, to have voting solution for small city halls, especially here in Spain and Catalonia. A lot of city halls vote now on smaller regulations and so on, and the people have a voice. But globally, we don't do it. It's done by lobbies, it's done by other interests. So we kind of have to learn where is our context, our place, and start interacting with those things and forcing the change in legislation ourselves. Nobody's going to do it for us.
Well, we talk about information to be forgotten and to delete it because transparency has its limit. But should the government have the possibility to forge information? For example, take a birth certificate. A birth certificate, if you put it on a blockchain, verified through a blockchain, you can verify if it has existed at the time. Should a government be able to create a new birth certificate for somebody who is already living for quite some time? For example, if they are in a witness protection program, for example, if they have a sex change and you want to create fake documents for good purpose, should this be possible? Or should we have technology that is preventing that because it means forging documents? So these are kind of difficult questions that arise when you look for technical transparency, which can serve a good purpose, but of course create new problems because sometimes we might want to forge things. And at least we should discuss whether we should have this possibility or not.
Yes, well, technology always goes faster compared with regulations or legislation. And this sometimes generated these situations in which you cannot see if something is legal or not. It's like illegal in this middle stage. And this could happen also with blockchain, but it's happening especially when you try to implement something that you consider, for instance, from transparency point of view, that I want to put things more open so everybody can see what I'm doing, and then I put it in a blockchain and suddenly say, oh, and then comes legislation and says, no, you need, for instance, GDPR says no. All the records that you have here, then you need to give the possibility that the owner, the person that is the owner of this information, they can claim that they want to delete this. You say, whoa, now I have a problem because I come faster from a technological point of view, and now I cannot delete this information because, for instance, the blockchain. So I think that sometimes it's good also to define when designing something based on blockchain, if you want to set up a public blockchain, a private blockchain, because there are different flavors about this, or if you want to have things that are off-chain to avoid, for instance, that this situation. So it allows you to introduce the technology in a way that can be tested, but at the same time, you cannot have in the future problems with the regulations.
Well, right on time. Thank you very much.
Everyone, can you hear me? Yes. Thank you very much for attending to the first day of Democracy for All. We expect you to be here tomorrow too. We hope you found the conferences interesting, and you are all invited to have a drink at the courtyard if you wish to join us. Thank you very much.